originally. And then we also identified as part of our study that some signal timing adjustments at that signal at certain times of the day. So the DOT was in agreement with that. And I think that was pretty much it. We also recommended a monitoring after opening, just to see how everything was functioning, and that was part of our conceptual approval.
Phil, I don't want to throw you a bit of a curveball here, but it was always assumed that if there was development next door, that the sites would be joined, and you alluded to that. How much of the widening and all the rest of that would be redone if that were to come to pass?
Okay, so if that was to happen, basically, the widening that was done as part of the access into Kimberly Corners there where the signal is, the widening is there. So if the access was able to shift to the northeast is really what we're talking about, this lane is already there. We're rebuilding this section. So what we would end up with, if this was able to connect and come out opposite the signal, we would end up with just a longer left turn lane, because this striping would be removed and it would be redone.
Any changes to the ingress and egress of the site as it is today, or as it's planned?
In terms of if that occurred,
Yes,
then this would be restricted to a right turn exit,
okay.
because left turns could then come out at the signal and proceed north. And I think
Okay.
the DOT in their review indicated that, and they wanted a note on the plan. If that ever did happen, it would allow this traffic to get out to the traffic signal in order to turn left and go east, northeast on Route 82.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jerry. Good evening, Mike Nowicki, biologist of the project. Chris Lapine invited me to just speak about the watercourse on the site. There are no wetlands, it's only the Wurtlekill from bank to bank, and whatever buffer that the town imposes. DEC regulates to the top of bank. It is a trout stream, a CET classified, so any impacts to the bank require a DEC Article 15 permit, which has been filed for already. The impacts to the bank from the, I believe it's a outlet for a pipe, will not require an Army Corps permit, because it qualifies for a nationwide 18 minor discharge, and we're under any threshold. I think it's 10 cubic yards. We would have to impact below ordinary high water to trigger applying for that. So we've got blanket coverage there. That's about it.
Do you have, you said you looked at the watercourse itself. Have you looked at, I'm assuming the site itself must have some sort of DEC permitting to do the cleanup, right? To do some sort. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, so is there any disturbance to the stream for the cleanup of the site, or none intended? Do we know?
Right now, at this point in time, until further investigation in terms of excavations on the site and determining the exact limits of it, which normally takes place during the remedial cleanup, I can't answer whether or not we're in the creek.
Okay. I think one of the things that we'll request, which I think we've done on other sites that are similar to this one, we'll look to have some sort of copy of either the permitting or the agreement with the DEC, just so we can see that there's cleanup planned and what those plans look like. We understand we don't have purview, but we'd like to have that in our record, since part of the reason you're proposing the development as you are is because the site needs to be cleaned up, and that's what this applicant is doing, so we'll want that. And with that being said, Tom, if I could just,
Okay.
sorry, Mike, did you want to?
If I could just sneak two more questions. One is, we've never seen, is there any seepage into the Wurtlekill now? Like that there is contamination? So there is, okay, so really time is of the essence here.
Yeah, it's intermittent. The first time I was out there, 2007, and it was dry. When I went out there last year,
He's talking two
it was
different
flowing pretty good.
Yeah,
I think you're talking
I
two
think you're
different
talking
things.
two
Yeah.
different
He's talking
things.
water
Yeah.
flow, you're
No,
talking seepage
contamination.
from the
Is there
contamination.
contamination from the leaching?
That I don't know.
Okay, so nobody is measuring that. But it is the site is contaminated. Is there any other plan to get this site remediated?
I'm talking to the wrong guy. I don't
Okay.
know.
So,
What do you mean by that question? Is there any?
meaning, if this development doesn't happen, there's this site that may or may not be leaching into the Wardour. Is there any other Plan B to fix it? Has anybody else come forward? Has the state come forward with a plan that says,
The
you know-
state has not come forward with the
Okay.
plan. There was an existing open spill number on this property.
Right.
There's also existing documentation from the DEC indicating that they need to have proper closure of the tanks that are on the site. And there was a recent spill number identified when they started their exploration again. This one came under their name. When they were doing a test pit out there, they encountered product.
so it's a safe assumption that it is leaching still, it is not contained, and that the options are
I
either,
don't, is that a correct assumption? I'm not sure.
that's what I'm asking.
I can't tell you whether or not it's currently leaching out there
Okay.
on the property. I do know that within the soils where they excavated, there was petroleum product. And that's supported by the additional spill that was reported to the DEC. So we have 2 open spill numbers on this site from previous.
Am I wrong? I thought closing the spill thing was the indication that it was contained. It wasn't completely cleaned up, but it was contained.
The previous spill from 1999 has never been addressed.
Okay,
So that's still an open spill number.
okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so it's, okay, I'm sorry, you wanted to ask Tom, sorry.
To answer
Okay,
your original question, I have not sampled
right,
the creek.
okay.
So, Tom, what I was going to ask is just, I know we've asked the applicant to acknowledge that we know there's a pending litigation that's challenging the law that allows this development to move forward. Do you want to give us maybe just a brief update, Tom, on where
Sure,
that litigation
sure.
stands?
You're correct. There was a litigation filed challenging the validity of Local Law 4 that was adopted in 2012 by the town board. That action was commenced against the entire law, against the town, not site-specific. The property owner here is seeking permission to intervene into the lawsuit because they have wanted to use that. As we know in the law, that a law is valid and in full force and effect until it's otherwise set aside by the court. In this particular lawsuit, it was fully submitted to the judge approximately 3.5 months ago. So the decision should be, quote, any day, but normally they've been taking about 6 months. So we should have it. The property owner is aware of the litigation, obviously not only by our informing him of it, but also by his actions in attempting to become part of the lawsuit. So that the law is valid at this time. There's nothing to prevent, there's no stay. The petitioners have not sought to stay the application by the court. And therefore, through due process, the application has to be considered. Obviously, it probably will coincide that a decision will come about the time, a decision from the court will come about the time that although the process might be complete for you to render a decision one way or the other.
But there is the potential that the court will decide against the town and revoke the law,
Right.
and the applicant understands that.
Understood.
Okay.
If I could, Tom, what is the basis of challenging the validity? I mean, it's just, what is?
Well, one of the,
rationale?
there's many different theories in it, but just to summarize the pertinent two, is that, number one, one theory that the petitioners have is that this is what you would refer to as a spot zone, because you're allowing a particular use only on one site. However, unfortunately, East Fishkill has many environmentally challenged sites within it. When we adopted the law in 2012, we had identified approximately 3 to 4 former gasoline facilities in the town that were like this, that they had spills on site. They were derelict properties because the prior property owners did not have the wherewithal to clean it up in accordance with DEC. And this was a opportunity to attempt to get some of these cleaned. The one that this board is probably familiar with is on the corner of Lake Drive and Route 52. That site lied derelict for many years, other than for a small mechanical operation. And by enactment of this law, then the property owner was able to clean it up, extensively cleaned up the property, and reconstructed it. The other issue in the lawsuit is an allegation that in all zoning ordinances, there's what they call a pre-existing non-conforming clause in your zoning ordinance. That is created by the town board when it creates zoning. And what it says, basically, to protect everyone's property rights, is when a zoning ordinance is adopted, they cannot force you to change the use of your property. It's allowed to continue in that state, and you become non-conforming. You don't comply with all the requirements of zoning, but you're allowed to continue to use the property. So with respect to these abandoned gas stations, obviously one provision in the non-conforming clause says that if a use ceases that was non-conforming for a period of 1 year or more, the property has to revert to its prior zone, to the current zoning. Obviously, these sites haven't been touched, so the town board, in enacting Local Law 4 of 2012, modified our non-conforming section to provide that if you are rebuilding and cleaning up the site by virtue of, under the supervision of DEC, that non-conformity 1-year abandonment clause is not applicable. So that's also the challenge. And then there's some other issues about procedural issues, et cetera. And I might just point out, too, going back to the issue you were talking about with cleanup, sites like this are prevalent throughout New York State. The state of New York has a spill fund that's funded by part of our gasoline tax. Unfortunately, there's not enough money generated into that fund to clean up the sites. So the DEC, because I deal in another municipality in Westchester, we have a site that's laid disgustingly collapsing and derelict for many years. And in that case, there is no one stepping up to clean it at the current time. So after much pressure and ado, years and years, DEC started the cleanup out of this fund, but they don't have the money. So now they're into their second year of attempting to clean it up, and it still hasn't happened. But that's the alternative. If nobody else cleans it up, it will lay fallow like that until DEC gets to it, because their priorities, and they'll tell you readily, we have them all over, and they're all types that are worse than this one or that one, and so.
Tom, you alluded to the gas station that it's that's right across from John Jay, correct?
Yes, correct.
So is there any substantive difference between that site and this site? I mean, is there any potential for impact to the John Jay site stemming from this lawsuit?
Well, no, that one already has a C of O and approval.
Okay, so
So
that's just
the worst
considered
the worst the
horse-
lawsuit would do to that is to render that non-conforming.
So it's the same horse, but the horse is out of the barn?
Yes, for that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Do we have other questions or comments from board members before I ask our professionals to give us a quick overview?
The location of the air and the vacuum, is that on this map, the latest one? We were looking for that one, and I'm sorry, Chris, minor point. Is that, oh, it's those dots, okay, thank you.
And then, Chris, I think one of the things that I had asked you about the last time you were here is whether we could shorten the queue lane by one car so that you could have a more, less conflicted egress if someone's making a left-hand turn. Were we able to do that? I know you were going to go back and look at it, you weren't
So we
sure.
actually had the opportunity to meet with the DOT today on that matter.
Okay.
Some other things came up during that discussion regarding both the means of ingress and egress. One of the things that was discussed, and we're in the process of doing right now, they thought it was a good idea of breaking this down, the striping this particular area to allow the left turns out.
Okay.
And shifting it over. They also thought we can still increase that queue by limiting, we talked a little bit last month about doing mountable curbing and narrowing up the entryways which would allow fuel trucks to still drive over the top of the mountable curbing, but typical pedestrian cars would be reduced down to a 26-foot wide means of
Okay.
ingress, which I think you guys were shooting for at our last meeting. They also talked about even potentially reducing this a little bit further, maybe to 20 feet or so, to only allow one car at a time to queue, as opposed to have two cars queue there, one taking the right and one taking the left. So the conversation got a little bit more in depth after we started talking about that.
Okay.
We didn't have the opportunity to meet with them until today, was the earliest time they can meet.
Okay.
So we're going to revise this plan per the discussions we had with the board to address the open area here and reduce the queue. And then we're narrowing the width of the entryway, but we're still going to allow the maximum maneuvering for the fuel delivery.
Okay. Thank you.
And you did go before the ARB, correct?
We went before the ARB in early August. We got approval for both the architectural plans, and they reviewed the landscaping and the ornamental fencing that was associated with the project. They did ask that we lower the ornamental fencing from, I believe we had it 4.5 feet. They asked us if we could reduce it down to 3.5 feet, which the 42 inches met the state requirements. So we did that. They also asked that we replace the fountain grass along the front of Route 82 with some vegetation that would remain its leaves throughout the wintertime as well. So we replaced that.
Okay. And are those the drawings that you have there? Because they're part of our public hearing, so if you want to share the elevations, if you want to put them up on one of the,
I could
case.
would you like me to put the elevations up on the,
Sure, we can do that.
I can try that.
You want to just, yeah. That way if folks want to take a look at them when we open for public comment, they'll be able to see the sketches.
and I think at our last planning
Do you
board
have
meeting.
ARB approval now, or are we
Yes, we
awaiting?
had ARB approval, and that was, we were informed this was provided to the planning board as well.
Okay. Pam, do we have an ARB approval for this one, or are we, there may just be? I don't have it in writing yet. Okay. I don't think we have the minutes from the last meeting. As long as it was approved, it's fine. It's fine.
Absolutely approved.
Okay,
We didn't leave until they approved it.
okay.
And just to discuss the one change that Mr. Nejwat shared with the board, he also added the additional field stone on each side of the building that the ARB had requested back in early July. They
Okay.
asked for it on the west and the east side, so that modification was made. And they were presented those plans as well.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from board members? Okay. Dave, do you want to give us a quick overview of any traffic concerns or anything we should be focused on?
Having reviewed the traffic impact study, we agree in general with the presentation, with the levels of service that have been displayed or depicted. One question I did raise with Phil briefly was, has any consideration been given to the assessment of cumulative queues? The analysis itself treats each intersection basically as standalone, and the level of service is fine, it's acceptable. However, given the close proximity of, number one, the Taconic ramps, the gas station, and Kimberly Corners, the signalized intersection, we just, as any consideration being to give an analysis of, the impacts of the queues, one on another.
Okay, so in terms of the queuing analysis that was done, there's two queues, okay? One is the queue coming in for the left turn coming in, and that is what we used to base the length of that lane. We needed a minimum of 3 vehicles to queue. So with the modifications that Chris talked about, discussed with the DOT today, we would still have at least 3 cars queuing to turn left into the site. That took into account the location of the signal, the location of the ramps, all the volumes. So not as an isolated intersection, it's the whole segment. The second queue is the queue for people wanting to make the left turn out. And what we had found was that delay, making the left turn out is actually helped a little bit about with the signal in place to the north, because it does create, some gaps when the turnover in the signal occurs. So I think in terms of the queuing analysis that was done, it addressed both of those to the best we could in terms of, our design and the features that are happening out there today.
I agree with that. Particularly, I was looking at the queue at the signalized intersection, and the analysis shows that there's a queue length.
Correct.
And
So-
what I'm concerned about is the impacts of, say, the left turns, trying to get out of the gas station
Yes.
and having nowhere to go with that because the queue has encroached.
Correct. So under existing conditions, you do have a queue that extends back from the signal heading northeast direction. So one of our recommendations was the timing of the signal to improve that, to reduce that queue. So Mr. Ellis is correct. That was what we observed out there, and we did make that recommendation in our report, and that was part of our discussions with the DOT. So I think that will help the situation in terms of the queues that currently exist. Thank you.
Thank you.
When you do the retiming of the signal, does it cause any issues in any other area?
No, what was happening is we're actually getting more green time coming out of Dunkin' Donuts and Kimberly Corners than we had originally designed it for.
Okay.
Over time, the signal timings change, so it's really just taking away green time from that approach. So the traffic along 82 will function better, and it also works fine with the Arthur'sburg, Sylvan Lake Road intersection. So it's
Okay.
really just reducing the green time for the driveway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Dave?
No, not at this time. As you said, the permitting does not fall under the town's purview.
Right.
But, as an interested party, obviously, we want to make sure that it is functional.
Okay.
I'm satisfied that the traffic impact study is acceptable.
How about the site circulation, the internal site circulation, parking, et cetera?
Well, it is a cramped site. I guess that's an understatement. Given the conditions that exist, I think that's the best we can do. I mean, I am concerned also about DOT saying that they only want one lane exit in the site. How does that impact your queues internally?
I think in terms of what Chris was saying was to narrow down the width of the exit from the site, so that we don't have too much of an expanse of that.
But we would have
Two lanes, but narrow it up so that it doesn't appear like it's 3 lanes, or people trying to come in the wrong way. So I think that's the clarification.
Okay. Michelle, do you want to give us a quick overview of your?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I just want to confirm the actual use in the cooking that's inside, what's proposed, has anything changed with the floor plan? And,
The floor plan we submitted hasn't changed.
and you're still, you're not going to be doing full-on cooking?
There's no
say?
deep fryer or anything of that nature.
Okay. Pete, anything from you?
Most of our prior comments were addressed. There was just a few that were still outstanding. I had emailed Chris. When the plans were first handed in, the limit of disturbance was, I think it was about .9 acres, which is below, the threshold for a full SWIP. And we had just asked with the additional work, including the work along the highway, are you still under the acre?
We are still under the acre, And that was reflected in our EAF that we had submitted.
That was in the last one, so that was in there?
It was I believe, .944 or .945. or
Okay, so
something
we'll
of that
double
nature.
check that, okay. Thank you. And then, the only other thing was, you have a stormwater filter on the site before it, discharges. Is there any, again, this is not a SWIP that requires an annual, report back to, the town, but as far as the maintenance of that, how is that done? Is there some kind of an operator who, like checks that, and there's a regular, like, maintenance on it? I mean, what assurances does the town
Yeah,
have that's gonna function right?
Gosselin took a responsible approach to the stormwater management here by integrating a stormwater filter practice into this to deal with any oils or greases, suspended solids, or anything of that nature that may be caught in the stormwater. And we introduced the stormwater filter product by Contact.
Right.
They do have a maintenance contract that you can engage in. It's typically, for something of this size, an annual inspection that takes place to take a look at the sediment level on top of the filter, any buildup of water in the base of the filter, any buildup of sediment in the base of the filter. And if you have water standing for following a rainstorm, they typically do their inspections following a rainstorm when they do those. We can certainly enter into an agreement with them and provide a copy of that to the town, similar to sometimes what we would be doing for the wastewater facility here.
Yeah.
We'd be entering into agreement, and we'd provide that to the health department for maintenance.
I mean, like, in my opinion, I think that would be a good thing for the town to have. I would just
Okay.
have to note that.
Okay, and forgive me, I didn't catch who the agreement is between that would be provided to
That a
the
certified representative of the manufacturer who provides the equipment. Right, Chris, is that
Correct.
Is that
It's
correct?
installed under their purview, and then it would be maintained by them.
Okay. Anything else, Pete?
No, that was it, thanks.
Okay. Scott or Tom, anything to offer for?
Yeah, we're working through a floodplain development permit. I know our office has sent comments to Chris that they're working through. I think we're making progress, and, that's what we're working on.
We spoke with Rick, and Rick also commented on the permitting that Mike spoke of earlier.
Okay. Is that something that was part of this public hearing, or does it have to be advertised separately?
Now, that would be part of this approval.
Okay.
You have floodplain development, and also believe they need an excavation and
Is that
mining.
part of our public hearing circulation? Okay.
That's for the site
Say it again?
plan. Ours was for the site plan.
We typically do that all as
Would it
well.
be a different,
Okay.
It's excavation and mining and floodplain development.
it would be included or a separate one?
They want it included, so we'd have to, yeah.
We'd have to have a separate, since the public hearing has to continue, we can.
Yeah, you may just, if you can recirculate before the next adjourn date.
With regards to the excavation permit.
Well, you're filling, right? You're bringing in,
We've given quantities, but is there an actual permit online? We couldn't,
It's floodplain development.
we have the floodplain permit.
right, but
The
it's
excavation and mining permit.
similar. We will issue it from this board.
There is a wetland permit too. Out now, there's a form now. I can get that to you.
Correct, but we're not disturbing the wetland.
For the town buffer.
Town buffer.
Yeah.
But that we supplied already,
Okay.
back in March or April of this year.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments before we open for public comment? All right, so is there anyone here who would like to speak for the Gasland East Fishkill site plan from the public? Okay, so if we have folks that want to speak, what I'd like you to do is, if you would, come up now. We have a sign-in sheet, and we'll call you in the order that you sign in. So you'll come up, you'll sign in. First person who signs in can come to the podium, and then we'll call you one by one. So you can go ahead and do that now. We'll take a few minutes for folks who would like to ask questions, or if you want to offer comment on the application, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah.
We did open the public hearing.
Make sure you write your name and address, please.
Pam, no TV, to TV.
No, I know.
Oh, you told me. Why not?
I don't know.
Give us just a minute, I'll let folks finish signing in if they wish. And if we could just have your name for our minutes.
Good evening, Carol Munger. I've lived on Sylvan Lake Road for 57 years, so I actually was here when that gas station was active. But anyways, you know how that area has been developed over the last 10 and 15 years. My concern at this point is not so much the volume of traffic, but the pattern. Taconic, of course, is a clover leaf. 82 goes underneath it. It's only 2 lanes there. I thought that a clover leaf was made to expedite traffic with right turns only. However, over 50% of the people are making left turns on and off of it. It's problematic, especially at rush time, with people going north 82, going to North Taconic. They're making left turns. So the traffic's backed up under Taconic, almost sometimes to the other gas station, and it causes a bottleneck because of, so I think the problem isn't so much the volume, but somebody should study the traffic patterns.
Okay,
Thank you.
Good
Thank
point.
you.
Thank you.
thank you. Phil, can I ask you to just come up and maybe talk about that for a minute? You're
So-
familiar
Yes.
with that entrance, and we all, I think, have probably either
Experienced.
seen it or
Yes.
possibly done that once or twice.
So there's 2 things in terms of movements that are not supposed to be made. And then, you know, in terms of the general function of a cloverleaf, yes, the idea is to have no left turn movements. Vehicles do make left turns. There's certain restricted left turn movements that probably need to be enforced more. The queuing issues with the width onto the Taconic, that's only 1 lane each direction. There's no plans for that to be widened to create an additional lane. I think in terms of this traffic from this development is not going to really affect that movement. You know, we're providing the turn lane at our entrance. But, you know, that's something, you know, maybe we can discuss it more with DOT as we go through the work permit process.
Okay.
So I think that's, you know, all I can tell you right now.
Yeah, I think it's not uncommon, especially for that northbound Taconic, and I guess maybe the left turn to get onto the southbound Taconic, because your sight distance when you're actually entering the Taconic itself is so much easier from one way versus the other.
Correct.
and that's-
And the length of the acceleration lane on the parkway.
Absolutely.
That's why, that's the way it is.
Wouldn't DOT consider, I think they call it a pork chop, that would force people only to make a right? So that, because
Yeah.
I think the lady's correct, everybody there, I know when I was judge, we got a lot of tickets from there
Yes.
because people make a left, despite the fact that there's clear signage, don't make a left.
Yeah, I think with just signing, people don't always obey signing.
Right. That's
think
why I thought if there was a
raised
physical-
island,
Yeah.
some type of a physical barrier is what would stop it totally. But I don't believe they have any plans. But, you know, as we go through the work permit process, we'll discuss that further with them and let you know. what
I have a question. Has any analysis been done, I guess you'd have to take license plate numbers, for the amount of traffic, for example, that is traveling northbound on the Parkway, makes, I guess would be an illegal left, or even come around and make the proper right to go south to the gas station, only to turn around and then go north home? Has there been any analysis to say how much of that traffic, what percentage of that traffic now would not have to go like south and back?
No.
And the impact, whether that
I-
be worse
I-
or better for
I
traffic
think
flow?
in general, what happens, and we did not we actually did survey the mobile station to see where traffic was coming from and turning in and out of the
By
driveway.
license plates, by
In
that.
terms of direction, but in terms of what you're driving at is, where would they possibly divert to? So we don't know the exact split, whether they're coming off the northbound ramp, the southbound ramp, or 82. We just know percentage-wise at the driveway. So in terms of historically, especially when you have a heavy through corridor like this, people will use, if there's another opportunity, they will use that. So instead of having to make a left turn, they will make a right turn and continue on. So for example, if I was coming from Sylvan Lake Road and I was going to the mobile station, I go to the mobile, I do make a right turn in, but when I leave, I make a left turn out to get to the parkway.
Right.
So you may find a diversion of traffic that would get gas here, and they would not have to make a left turn. They would use a right turn. But we haven't taken any credit. We assume that everybody that's
That might be
there-
a credit, actually.
Yeah, it would actually be less turning movements. So we haven't taken any credit for that because some of it is a guess, because even if you know where they're coming from, you don't know that people will, maybe
But
they
you'd have
like
to
the
take
coffee.
license plates, right? You'd have to
Yeah,
actually sit there.
to really
and
break it down.
Yeah.
But the reality is, even if you know that, you can't say for sure that someone's going to, maybe they like the coffee at a certain place or whatever. They may not change their
They may
pattern.
not change their routine.
However, based on what I've seen, is that you will get people that will use a station in order to avoid certain left turn movements.
That might be after, after.
Especially at peak hours.
In peak hours,
Assessment.
Right.
yes.
Maybe a
Not
year,
throughout the day, but
6
peak
months to a year from now,
Wow.
during the month.
A year from now, it's done. That's what I'm
Well,
asking. What about
that's the only way you can really get it.
projected now?
Yeah, it's, right now, I would say we just haven't taken any credit for it. Based on the distribution of where people are coming from in terms of volume.
I know a person spoke up that the traffic backs up now, so I guess my question is, would this actually help alleviate that or not?
I think you would
Or
get.
make it worse, as the case might be?
I think you would get some diversion, you would get some people. I don't think it's gonna make it worse, because I don't think you're gonna, create more turning movements that aren't, stackable. But again, we've analyzed it as if everybody stays where they are, so the existing conditions, and then we're on top of
You
that.
added more traffic?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So that's kind of worst
And
case.
we- and
That's worst
again-
case, basically.
Yes, we didn't take any credit. I mean, with this type of
We
facility.
looked at worst case.
Most of what you're gonna get, especially in peak hours, is 50, 60, 70% of the people are already on the road. So, thank you.
Thank you. You had raised your hand. Did you want to come back up, Carol? or you-
I just wanted to say
I'm going
that
to have you come back up to the mic if you don't mind. I know we can hear you in the room, but they are recording.
you were talking about, there is no turn sign on 82 North.
Right.
There's no left, there's 3 or 4 on every other one, but not there.
Okay.
They put it up once, there was up for one day, and it disappeared.
Disappeared, huh?
But anyway, so it can't be illegal, you can't ticket them if there's no sign.
Right.
But
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's the next person on our list?
Who's next? Pamela McCreef.
Hi, everyone. Pamela McCreef, how are you?
Good.
First, I have just a couple points. I'm very impressed with what I've heard today. I can see the teamwork from everyone, all the input that's been done, prep work and continuing, so I'm pretty impressed with everything. So I'd like to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
I am a customer of Gasland. I can go to every gas station they have, from Poughkeepsie to Hopewell, and everything is perfect. Everything gets done properly. I think it'd improve that area 150%. And that's really why I'm here, just to support that, and I think we're moving in the right direction if everybody approves it and everything's fine. And I'm glad to be a part of that, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Karen Laporta?
Hi, I'm Karen Laporta. I live on Cary Road in East Fishkill. I wanted to say a few words also in support of this project. This area is an entryway to East Fishkill. And currently, it's an eyesore, as you saw the pictures. It would be nice for it to be cleaned up. The project would really increase the property value, and therefore the taxes, which would really help our town. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Okay, was there anybody want to come up? We just, okay, perfect.
You have a second, you Brent, okay.
Not that we don't know you.
Hi, all. For those who don't know me, I'm Brent Feldwig. I'm the chairman of the CAC in East Fishkill. We had a couple of continuing questions. We did submit some comments back in March of this year. Many of those questions were dealt with in following revisions of the plan. But I think, you know, we all who have seen this property before are aware that it's extremely flood prone. And the applicant did on the plat, and Mr. Lupin, correct me if I'm wrong, as far as the elevations, you guys plan to raise this 2.5 feet above the flood stage, right? Correct. Okay. Our concerns are two. We did pose a question of how the sewage disposal system is gonna operate under flood conditions, because there have been a couple storms where I've driven by this property and the entire property is underwater. So I'm not sure if 2.5 feet is gonna get the sewage disposal system far enough out of that floodplain. I'd love to see some analysis on that, or some additional analysis if you've got some. And then secondly, related question, how will that sewage disposal system operate or react to a gush of flood water that, you know, that's gonna impact it, so.
I'm sorry, Brent, you're saying that the entire site was underwater? So is it,
A good portion of it, yeah.
so I guess what I'm asking is, are you saying, indicating that there's a potential for the new proposed station to be inundated with water as well?
On the
I'm going
existing-
to, Brent, go ahead and come back up to the mic if you don't mind.
On the
Yeah.
existing elevation of the site now, we did have flood conditions in the end of the winter. This last winter, the entire site wasn't underwater, but I did run by there, take a couple photos, and it seemed like there was a good insurgence of flood water toward the backside of the existing building. So, you know, that potential exists. We did have an application of this site before the town. It has to be 10 or 15 years ago. And another CAC member had gone out there and observed, you know, water over a large portion of this site, you know, as well as bubbling underneath 82 and, you know, bubbling up a manhole on a catch basin on the other side of the street. So, you know, flooding is definitely a concern here. Our concern, you know, number one is how that sewage disposal system is going to operate, you know, under flood conditions.
Brent, I want to say, maybe Scott, help me remember, wasn't there an issue, though, with the culverts not being properly sized that was causing some of that flooding?
Oh,
or
yeah, there
is
was a
that
project
not
on
what I'm-
the other side of the street. The culvert was enlarged. I know prior to that, there was some flooding even across 82, I think, at some time,
Right,
particular
right.
time. And I know the culvert was redesigned. I know there was a detention basin built up in the back. I personally went out there myself this spring, and I did see the creek flowing through the backyard, but my understanding is there was some obstruction in the stream that was, you know, they went in by hand, removed the obstruction. I think that alleviated that problem, so.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, hold on a second, Chris, if you don't mind. Brent, you said you had two concerns.
Yeah, well, the other one is also, you know, flood water and storm conditions related, and deals more with the underground storage tanks that are proposed to go in there. Correct me if I'm wrong, fiberglass tanks are proposed here on this project? Double-walled fiberglass, okay. Our question is, consider this set of circumstances. You have a storm situation where a large amount of the area has been out of power for a couple of days. People are hitting the neighboring gas stations pretty hard for generator gas and things like that, fuel for their cars. You have an enhanced high water table flooding conditions around this gas station. And because of maybe a high demand for gasoline deliveries, those tanks become somewhat empty. Is there a buoyancy problem? I mean, what holds those tanks down if they're empty and the high water table comes up and is at the level or above the top of the tanks? I mean, you'd have to tell me, you guys are the engineers, but is there a buoyancy issue that the town should be aware of on a site like this that's got a high water table?
Thank you.
Let's start with the first question about the floodplain. So, your
And I'm
first
sorry,
que-
Brent, did you have other points for us, or were you good? Okay, perfect. All right, go ahead, Chris, thank you. No, you're fine.
I was going to ask Brent a question, so don't get too comfortable.
So this is the floodplain, which we spoke of before, which was at elevation 331. The building itself is going to be at 333 and a half. So the building itself and everything in the front of this will be elevated above the current floodplain, where you won't have the buildup of surcharge of stormwater in the parking area or in front of the building. With regards to the wastewater treatment facility that's being proposed here, this too will, and this is going to tie into your other question about buoyancy.
Chris, I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, just,
This is going to tie into your other question about buoyancy. So anytime you have a site where you have the opportunity for a high groundwater table or a situation like this, all your structures are looked at in terms of buoyancy to ensure that in an empty condition, like the tanks, like a septic tank or anything of that nature, that the concrete itself is thick enough in terms of the wall thickness, the base is thick enough to prevent the ability of groundwater from pushing it up. That's how we design the wastewater treatment facility here. With regards to the tanks that are in the ground, the tanks will be designed based upon an empty condition for buoyancy. So they'll be both anchored in terms of concrete for the base of it to ensure that those tanks under empty conditions don't pop up under the ground based upon a groundwater concern that you spoke of. With regards to the wastewater treatment discharge during a high storm, there will be what's called a flapper valve at the end of that, which won't allow water from the creek to come into the system. The other thing is the system itself is going to be at a higher elevation, once again, which is going to be higher than the flood elevation. So we don't have that concern about any surcharge backing up into our system.
Yeah, I guess our concern was, more, we're getting more and more severe flooding conditions, as every construction project happens in a floodplain. Our concern was, is that elevation of the top manhole, if you will, of the sewage disposal system, I have no idea what the top of it looks like. I mean, is that sealed enough to prevent stormwater from getting down in there?
It has to have a watertight seal on it.
Right, okay.
So we don't have water getting into it, and it's, just to give you an idea here, here's the curbing here. So that's 6 inches lower from where the stormwater is flowing, and then here's our wastewater treatment plant, slightly above that. So they'll be elevated an additional 6 inches, so we're a foot above the parking lot there with the top of the roof.
Thanks.
Before, Brent, I'm sorry, Chris, were you done with the responses?
Yes.
Brent, if I could, just a quick question, because I know you stay abreast of a lot of these things.
Sure.
Do you see any other effort to get this spill cleaned up?
Well, we weren't aware of anything else, no.
Okay.
No, I mean, and I might certainly throw in my hat with the other comments. It's great to see a business coming forward and taking a site like this and taking the lead on it and spearheading a cleanup. Yeah, if this would happen more, that would be better for everybody.
So it's a project, it's this project or a project like it, or learn to like the spill?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Did we have anybody else on our list?
I don't believe so, no.
Did anybody else sign in or want to offer comment? Okay, we are going to be adjourning this meeting, so you'll have another opportunity to comment if you choose. I thank everybody for offering to comment. Chris, do you want to come on back up for me? So I've got a couple of things we need to follow up on. We know we're waiting on the response from Town of LaGrange. They received their notice. They haven't had the 30-day comment period yet, so when we adjourn you, that will be completed. We'll be able to finish a lead agency declaration. You also, we asked you to provide us with a copy of whatever your DEC, the open spills and the cleanup agreement, just so we have the documentation that you are meeting the terms of the law, showing that that will happen.
Just for the record on it, you do have a copy of all the spills that's been provided to the town.
Okay.
We will give you a copy of the work plan once that's developed.
Yeah, it's really the work plan that we're looking for, because that's what enables you to utilize this law for this proposed development. And then I have, if you're doing the floodplain development permit, we probably need to, between now and when your next adjournment is, renotice to include that development permit, so it's part of this public hearing.
And it's
I'm looking
also
at
the
Scott again.
excavation and mining permit as well.
Excavation and mining as well, okay,
Even
so.
though it's a fill job, it still goes underneath that permit.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that we're, if we can, let's advertise and let's be able to open them and be concurrent with this public hearing. Okay, and then, Pete, I think you said you had a couple of comments and you were looking for a copy of an agreement for the stormwater
Maintenance contract.
maintenance contract, okay.
And on that note, I imagine you'll have one with the health department? How does that work?
There'll be a maintenance contract as a condition of getting your approval.
And the health department polices that on an ongoing basis? How does
Yes.
that work? Okay.
And you
Does that have to be an operator? That's
It
probably
has
going
to be a certified operator of the unit.
because it's got a speed.
But the health
permit.
department monitors that?
Yes, we've done this before with,
Or is it DEC that monitors? Who actually monitors it?
we're under 1,000 gallons, so in this particular case, it would be the health department.
Okay.
Okay, and then I think there may still be a couple outstanding comments in our professionals' comment letters, and you did mention, based on your meeting today with the DOT, that you might be tweaking some of the...
We're gonna- yeah.
So I'm assuming you'll have an adjusted map before the next
Correct.
adjournment.
We'll make a submittal of everything prior to that next meeting.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. All right, did anybody have anything else that we would want before the next adjournment? And any other final questions? Okay. Chris, our next meeting is September 18th. Does that give you enough time to do the renoticing for the 2 permits that you need?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for us before I adjourn us?
No, I think I'll contact you tomorrow on the excavation and mining.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn the Gasland public hearing to September 18th?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Motion, a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is a sketch plan review for 1531 operating on Route 82.
Yeah, I saw some of the emails today.
Yeah, I gotta get this letter,
All right, so we're good for now, right? We're good. I'm going to call you tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey, Karen.
So it'll be a YouTube and around, 'cause it's thank you.
Oh, sure, I'll do that for you. Is it over there on the table?
Yeah, but he looks different.
Good evening. Al, this rezoning looks a lot like Gasland.
You can give us, start your overview if you want, while Michelle
So I
pulls
don't
it
know
up.
if everybody's had the opportunity to read my little narrative, to give a little background to what's going on here.
Yep.
I'll refresh everyone, just for the heck of it. The current owners, 1531 Operating LLC, is in fact the attorneys that were renting. They now own the building. They've been renting in the current facility for 12, 15 years. They rented from Dr. Yan, who originally came before this board, obtained site plan approval, and built the building. He was in failing health, and the attorneys and Dr. Yan made a deal to buy the building. He's since passed away, and when the attorneys, who must have bought the building for cash, financed the building afterwards, they found that there was a series of violations, building-related, site-related, et cetera, which we're here trying to correct. And one of the major issues is the fact that the building, as illustrated by the survey and my site plan, suggests that the pavement is not all on this particular property. And we'll see that shortly.
I was gonna say, the
Great.
driveway is the number, I mean, I know you're trying to fix a lot of things, but the driveway sitting on somebody else's property
That's correct.
is,
I mean, there are a number of issues here, so that's one of the issues. And the current owners, one of the attorneys, one of the partners, went to the adjacent property owner to try to strike a deal, either to purchase a property or do a lot line realignment, and as of today, nothing has happened. So our only recourse to move this thing along is perhaps to modify the driveway that we have here.
Do you have enough space to do that?
Excuse me?
You have enough space to do that, to bring it onto your property?
Oh, I think we do, and that's why we're here to discuss this, and perhaps the planner or whomever else can take a look at it and see, what their thoughts are. We have issues also historically where the building has been not expanded footprint-wise, but additional uses and additional square footages somehow found their way into the building. So originally, and fortunately or unfortunately, we were the original architects of the building, and we did the site plan. And originally, this was for Dr. Yan's office and perhaps renting it out for additional offices. And we did have approval for a caretaker apartment, if you will, on the second floor.
On the second floor?
And I think that's all documented, and Pam did a
It
good
is.
job doing some research, and you have that. However, in the interim, we come to find that there's an additional office space on the second floor that was built, perhaps with a permit, perhaps without a permit, but right now, that building is being occupied on the second floor by an apartment on one side and a psychologist's office on the other side. We submitted floor plans of the existing first floor building, of the building, and the existing second floor of the building.
As it's currently being used.
That's currently being used, that's correct. So, Amity, Demers, yada, 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 occupy 50% of the first floor. The other side right now is currently vacant. They'd like to fit that up at some point in time, but we're not going to be able to get any building permits until we at least rectify what we're doing here. Part of the issue we have is also, we don't have enough parking. And I'm looking,
It's apparently not finding it on that disc. Do you have another copy of it on you by any chance?
did you flip, I have a,
Do you have any paper
I have a paper
plans?
copy.
If you have a paper copy, that's fine, we can look at that.
yeah, could you step us through the violations and the remediations plan? I mean, that's,
Well,
I mean, because you're listing a lot of them, and I'm,
there are, how can I put it? There are violations that exist both internally and externally, and I think they're easy to rectify. The big issue is is what we want to do with this driveway on the right side of the building, on the east side of the building.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure, thanks. So we have, again, the building, the single entrance. Right now, there's a one-way going around the building, towards the right, coming around counterclockwise. One way out. The area to the right side, again, if you can see it, which is, from your distance may not, there's an encroachment of maybe 4 or 5 feet on the neighbor's property. So we're looking to just shave the planter on the east side of the building, recurb everything, maintain the current flow, and if that's agreeable, then that's what we're going to do.
So you're moving the driveway, not the lot line?
I can't, right now, the owner, the
It said the
adjacent property
adjoining
owner is
property owner
not
was-
allowing
Right,
us.
okay.
You know, the dialogue isn't there, at least at this point in time.
Okay.
So this either lingers forever while they're negotiating with the neighbor, or we be proactive and we say, okay, we have to do something. So we're looking to forget about that guy and let's just bring the driveway in conformity totally on this parcel.
Okay.
There's also, again, the issue with the number of parking spaces, partially being contributed by the additional square footage of the offices upstairs, which I'm going to say were never approved, they're illegal. And you may say, cease and desist the offices on the second floor. I'm sure these guys would prefer that you didn't do that, but that's a reality. So we need some direction, and that's why we're here, just for discussion
So,
purposes.
so if you were to have the required parking spaces for the space you are currently using, the way you are currently using, how many parking spaces are required?
I need 26.
And how many do you
I
have?
have 23.
Okay.
I did not count 2 parking spaces, though. If anybody's visited the site, I didn't count them.
issue going
There are
on the
2 parking spaces in tandem in the front of the building on the Route 82 side. Dimensionally, they're striped, and I don't want to say they're correct dimensionally, but I did not count them, not for any particular reason, but.
Al,
you know.
just so I understand, I know that some of the dimensional parking spaces were not correct, currently out there right now.
Correct.
The site plan that you're showing does show the proper dimension?
That's correct.
Okay. And then my other question is, when this site was occupied, the upstairs, I know there was an apartment up there, and then there was a second apartment at one point? Is that what the other space that is now office was used for?
I don't know if there was ever a second apartment, and historically, there may have been. There is physically a kitchen in that office on the second floor. Could have been a second apartment. I have no knowledge of that. But right now, a psychologist's office, an apartment. Kitchen notwithstanding on both sides.
And is there really any caretaker role for the person who's occupying the apartment?
No, that's strictly a rental. Right now, when that transition took place, again, this building was built in 1986. So I have no idea what's happened. Matter of fact, Dr. Yan had other architects and engineers intervene during the course of time between 1986 and today. The building was modified to include structural modifications to the left side of the building where the offices are upstairs, not per my plans, and they're at the building department. But there is no drawings or permit per se showing what that occupancy would be. But there is another architect's plans. There is also the health department. They modified the health department after we got the Board of Health approved. Somewhere along the line, it was increased, the size of the septic, believe it or not, to include that extra flow from that extra square footage. So my plans are there, approved, and there's another modification that was made after the fact by another design professional. How, why, who, don't ask me, but I was brought in because I happen to know the attorneys that occupy the building, so.
And it's all proposed office space, just pure office space? at this
Right
point?
now, it's downstairs, as you go in the main lobby, and again, you know, maybe a little side trip would be good. Left side of the building, totally demolished. That was a violation because they thought these guys, the attorneys, demolished it without a demolition permit. supposedly Jan was doing it because there was a leak and all this other stuff. But be that as it may, the attorneys are going on the left side of the building, and the right side where they currently are is going to be fitted up at some point in time as offices. They have no plans for upstairs other than keep the status quo if they could. And so they're not here, and if it's suggested that we cease and desist the second story, partially or wholly, it is what it is. I'm just here to find out. Don't know if the septic system as redesigned is adequate by today's standards to take care of the flows. So once we know what we're dealing with square footage-wise and occupant-wise, we can back into what we have there and the flows and things of that nature.
Okay, so you said the left side of the building, the downstairs is also gutted right now?
Left side of the building downstairs is 100% gutted. You go in the center lobby, two-story lobby, and the left side of the building, it's totally vacant and gutted, yes.
Okay, and you're planning office space, but not medical office space?
No medical offices, absolutely.
And so the 26
It'll never be, because obviously I can't meet the criteria or the threshold for standard offices, and we know that your criteria for parking for medical facilities is much more stringent. We'll never be able to make, and that could be a condition of whatever, whenever we get to that point.
Okay,
Just to go back also, this was originally zoned residential, so historically, again, when this was, don't ask me how, why, or whatever, but when we brought this before you in 1986, there was a fire on that property of the residents. Dr. Jan operated out of that building. He was allowed to build this facility in its place. Residential zone, that size, that shape, that configuration. Don't ask me how or why, but that's what it came to be. Now it's zoned, of course, commercial.
okay. So, Michelle, can you just talk to us about what's permitted here in terms of office versus residential unit in the upstairs or offices in the upstairs, just so we're clear what's permitted?
Right, so now it's a commercial B1 district, so it's permitted principal use is office. However, we did a little bit of research on the property, and we did find that the apartment, when it originally went in, was a legal apartment, and it did get a CO. Because I'm assuming at the time.
Legal or was illegal?
It was a legal. It was
It was
legal.
legal,
apartment, yep.
okay.
And I believe at the time when they put the apartment in, it may have been an R district, and they were actually, it was almost the opposite. They put the apartment in to make it legal because they had medical offices there, I think is what happened.
Okay.
So regardless, the apartment has a CO and it's legal.
Okay.
The upstairs office space currently is illegal. And the downstairs demolition, my understanding is they did it without a demolition permit, so that's a violation, but that was allowed to be office space. And I believe there was also some fire code violations, which I think have been fixed. So they fixed a bunch of the things, and then some of the things they can't fix because they need planning approval to do so. So that's sort of where they are right now.
Okay.
And then when you were doing the parking calculation, how many professional offices are upstairs? Is it 2?
One office.
Just one,
professional
okay.
office. They have, if you go up there, and again, I'd be glad to show you up there, but there is a floor plan in there. In the little package I sent to you. You go upstairs, there's a waiting room, and there's 3 offices. There's 2 women, I believe, never met them, that occupy the suite. So if you go in there, it's a psychiatrist, psychologist's office, and 2.
Oh, I guess what I'm getting at is if they're separate.
No,
say-
you
say
go up the
separate-
set of stairs, and it's one suite. Yeah, it's
Right,
one- it's
but
one
they're
suite.
separate, like it's not just one psychologist with one patient. It can be 3 psychologists with 3 patients at the same time. I'm trying to figure out what the parking issue would be at that point. So in other words,
Wouldn't that be considered medical space then, if you were trying to count spaces?
well, I think because of the type of space it is, it's typically 1 or maybe 2 people would show up at any given time if it's a psychologist
Yeah, you don't have the waiting
You don't
room
have-
situation, I don't think,
But-
to have in a normal.
But it's not just one office because it's
Right.
not just one person with.
More than one doctor
Could
on
be
site.
several people in the waiting room waiting, overlap. So I'm just trying to understand that situation. And then downstairs, so right now you parked it at 1 per 300, which is a typical office space.
1 per 300, that's correct.
And then, but you didn't include any additional space for employees?
Do you usually ask for it? You usually ask for 1 per X number of square feet plus several per suite.
Right.
So we have 3 suites, assuming 1 suite down left, 1 suite down right, and 1 suite upstairs. So that's how we established the
And
3
that's the
suites.
26?
That's how I got to 26, that's
Okay.
correct. 5,300 square feet roughly, divided by 300, gets me 18 plus the other 8, or however it works out, 6 plus 2 for the residents. I think I counted a couple of parking spaces there for the residential use, gets me up to 26. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to tell you that the psychologists are never there, but they're never there. That doesn't make it right. Who knows who's going to rent it in the future if we're allowed to maintain it. And the attorney's office, it's not that it's a bare bone operation, but you don't ever see that many cars there. But again, we can't assume that the minimal use will be maintained. We have to go based on the square footage and the potential use.
Okay. Michelle, if it was approved by this planning board, though, the second floor could have office space in it, correct? Okay. Is the residential unit also permitted, continue to be permitted since it's got a CO right now? Okay. Is there an ability to put a second residential unit upstairs? No. Okay. I'm just trying to make sure that we know what the ground rules are. So, Al, what are you proposing? Are you proposing to keep the office space as it is and to take whatever spaces had to be gutted, do the repairs, and bring it back to office space, or are you proposing something different?
No, I'm proposing exactly that, and I'm looking at some input as to the fact that not that we're trying to squeeze, but we're trying to reposition that one-way entrance on the east side to curbed within 2 feet of the building, which is fine, and then move on with a more complete site plan. This is just a sketch plan, this is for discussion
Right,
purposes.
right.
And
Will that-
Was
will
there
that-
space for, oh, sorry.
Will that new resulting driveway require a variance?
no, I don't think it does. It's 15 feet wide now, it's going to be 15 feet in the future.
And
Basically, I have 17.7 feet or something like that from the corner of my building to the property line.
Okay,
So if I
that
put
was
my
the key.
curb right
That
on
was
the
the number I
property
didn't
line,
catch.
I
Okay.
have 2.7, call it 2 feet left. That's
Okay.
what we're looking to do. I lose some planting on that side, whoops. I got to repave, I got to do some reclamation work on the neighbor's property. That's the price that somebody's got to pay there.
Hey, Michelle, what happens if if that apartment becomes vacant? Does that then revert to B1 and they would lose that CO? Or?
Theoretically, it's a pre-existing non-conforming apartment, so if it remains vacant for, our code right now says if it remains vacant for over a year, then I guess they could technically lose their, I mean, because it's a B1, they can get a special permit, which would allow them to have a residential apartment for a caretaker, but not the way the apartment is currently used, which is just as a rental.
Right.
Is it a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom apartment?
It is a 2-bedroom with a den or a study. It is, yeah.
Guest room.
And I don't think we laid it out. So years ago, it looks like it is an ad hoc arrangement up there that somebody built and configured. However, and I don't think there's anything in the building department files that suggest a floor plan for either the office or the apartment. So we were asked to do an existing conditions plan and submit it by the building department, which is in your packet, but we didn't submit it yet because why submit it if you're going to knock the office out? It's a moot point, so. But the plans are here in your little packet, and it's prepared to be submitted to the building department as requested by them as
Okay.
one of the line items
Okay.
of violations.
So, Michelle, you had mentioned, I think, that some of the parking spaces were not up to code.
Originally, the original plan had,
So now the 23 spaces, we believe, are the proper
Correct.
sizing
Al
for...
said that he correctly sized them.
I mean, there's no, you know, crowded parking there now, is there? Anytime I've driven by, it looks pretty, like, half full max.
But I think as long as we, I don't know, right now, currently, the way they're showing the uses, I think we've got uses that will not generate the parking demand that basically they have enough parking. It's just, in the future, we need to make sure, like, I think we need to restrict that there's no medical, which
Correct.
we agree
And that could
to.
be
And you said that you're still working with the Board of Health to find out what the septic situation is there?
No, I do have what was additionally designed. What I have not done is work backwards to make sure that in fact, by today's standards, everything.
Well, because that would be helpful information, because then we would know if this discussion is, and essentially we'd know if they would even allow
And
you to
it
have
was-
that.
It's like the cart before the, horse type of thing. Do you say, if you tell me to take the offices off the table, then it's a moot point. If the offices stay, then yes, I have to prove to you guys, because that's part of the criteria for changes of use and yada, yada, yada. I have to make sure that the septic systems are adequate. Yep.
And you would also, like Michelle said, likely face a restriction from medical
That's-
office use.
That's fine.
And Michelle, I guess I heard psychologists, psychiatrists in the upstairs. To me, that's medical, even if we don't think it generates the same kind of, as, say, a pediatrician or something, but that is still medical, correct? So
Well,
are
I mean, I
we?
guess, technically, there's the potential that you could have somebody in the waiting room, somebody in your room, so you could have some stacking going on, but usually in those types of offices, you don't see that for those small.
But if we have a
Psychologist-
restriction that says no medical, is it grandfathering the existing tenant but saying no more after that? Or is it saying no medical except if you have a medical practice that doesn't
Actually, if we look
stack?
at the zoning ordinance and we look at the definitions, it's not a medical or dental group, nor is it a medical or dental office.
And I actually think that
Because the medical or dental office is an office of not more than 4 physicians. So it,
I think we actually define, I may be wrong, but I
Saying
think
that
professional office,
psychiatrists aren't doctors?
professional office, we
confused by that.
specifically
professional office.
see if they have,
I don't-
I think
I
there's
think
something that actually defines.
Psychiatrists and psychologists don't try for the
Psychologists.
5 minutes per patient thing.
Do they have something?
The
psychiatrist is an
not more
MD,
than
whereas
the
psychologist does not.
Right, but they still don't try for the 5-minute rule,
I guess it
right?
fits in here.
Because
State
we
your
No,
problem and get out.
but this zoning
not a
doesn't
group,
say
it's
that. The
not
zoning
there.
says medical practices with.
I think it's a short
I
form
think
of
though, when we
zoning,
say
but-
that you're allowed to have a professional office in a residential district, we allow psychologists' offices, right? Correct? So I think that's the way I was looking at it, but, I mean, it probably could be interpreted another way, but that's how I would look at it.
Okay.
So I think, in other words, I think that that's probably not going to be an issue. I'm trying to think right now off the top of my head if there's a way we could restrict it to make
So it's a
certain that we wouldn't
professional
have an
office.
issue with it in the future.
I would be fine to grandfather existing tenants or something like that, but I think any additional tenants of a medical nature, you would still ask that they come back here so that we can look at parking again. To me, that's, I don't know
That
how
sounds
else you would
reasonable.
do that.
I think that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I should have probably paid more attention, but I'm not so sure that a psychologist needs to be a doctor per se, so what classification do they come in if they're not? And I should have seen on their, if they are in fact doctors on the door.
Psych-
But right here, we
Psychiatrist.
have it as professional office if it's a
Includes
psychologist.
psychologists and therapists.
So that's a professional office,
Right,
not
correct.
a medical office.
And we would amend our, when you get your final CO, it would say
So-
limited to professional offices.
That's fine.
And then if you wanted to come back
classify
for
that,
medical,
then-
you gotta come
Okay,
back.
but if you
That
have
sounds-
someone who has the medical degree in that office today, you're gonna ask us to grandfather them in.
Well,
That's all we're
What
saying.
mental- What type of degree, though?
Like a psychiatrist
I think you have a
versus
psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist is
and
professional office.
It doesn't, I think it has, as to the volume, I think you have 2, and the professional office is limiting the number to a lower number than once you hit 4 or 5, then it goes
We're all
into
saying the same thing, but we're
medical
okay with
offices.
it.
and
Okay.
that
I'm
kind
pretty sure we're all saying we're okay with it,
Yeah.
so I think we're good.
Yes.
I think, yeah, Al, I think the message you're
Al,
hearing,
we're
at
actually
least from-
arguing in your favor.
is we
want
want to
this
help you,
noted.
but.
I think you're arguing with us, not against us, just so you know, because that's what we're saying. We
Yeah.
think we could either
think
grandfather
it's
them in or make the.
Reasonable
make it
office
clear.
use, and the
Current
apartment could be
definitions allow
grandfathered, or it could be
Could I
caretaker.
ask,
Medical wouldn't
I found this confusing from the get-go, is at the end of the day, you know, like, for example, you're fixing the driveway by yourself.
Yes.
So it's like, at the end of the day, what are we?
That's
We got a
correct.
list of problem fix, problem fix.
Right. What am I here for? Do I need to have an amended site plan and have a public hearing and all of that stuff?
Okay.
We don't know, who I ever talked
Does
to
he have no
in town,
parking?
we don't know.
You need to amend the site plan because your parking currently is not in compliance because the existing site
This is
plan shows
definitely an
parking that
amended
is-
site plan. You have
Okay.
encroachments right now that you're correcting, you're changing your parking configuration.
Yeah, because the parking that's shown currently is, the spaces are too small. They don't meet the current dimensional requirements for the
And the
parking.
apartment's not on the current site plan either, right?
On this site plan, it reflects the apartment.
Your site plan, but
Yes.
what's on file.
The
doesn't-
approved one
I
doesn't.
have to imagine it's in a matter of minutes, and I've never even seen my original.
It's in
I can't
minutes.
find them. It's,
It's up in Iron Mountain.
you have it?
Yeah,
Nobody ever showed it to me.
jello and
Wait,
faded,
it's-
but it's there.
Oh, is it
Building
there?
plans
You
or
know
the
better
site
than I,
plans?
I never seen it.
The building plans or the site plan?
The site plan.
Is it?
So we have a copy of the building
Spaces?
plans.
Does the
Okay,
Or the
that's
number
good.
of spaces?
changing the
It's everything,
parking
'cause it's changing
immediately?
changing the driveway, he's changing all the
It's in the minutes, but you have a physical
Yeah,
plan.
especially the move of the
I
driveway.
don't think you have a physical plan.
Okay.
He didn't use medical.
Okay.
That's okay, you don't have to
So-
look now. So what am I doing from here? To what degree of, I don't want to say detail, do you want us to show?
So
Are you going-
you're gonna submit a site plan, an amended site plan to us, an application for an amended site plan with a change of use because you're requesting to be allowed to use that second floor
Okay.
for the offices.
Okay,
Michelle, anything else we need to say? I think that's exactly what I would
Are you
submit
going
and submit it
outside
as an
the paved
application.
area now? Do you have to make the paved area bigger, or are you just reconfiguring your
just
spaces?
reconfiguring.
So you're not going out any of the
Well, no,
dimensional?
he is, because he's going into the planters next to the building, he's
Yeah.
moving
I
the
mean,
parking.
yeah,
I mean, it's not a big deal, but
Right. I want to make sure that,
it's not a big deal.
right.
Don't you think?
I mean, I want to make sure that I'm not being asked to
be a
redo
public
redo landscaping, lighting, this, that, and every other thing, and if so, I don't want to say, tell me now, I don't want to come back 2, 3, 4, 5 times, I just want to,
So we would like you to have a complete site plan when you apply to us. So include your landscaping and lighting and parking and your access if you're changing, when you reconfigure the drive. And please provide a description of the space as you would like to have it configured and used, which will be your change of use request.
downstairs? Or where do you want that plan?
I think you need to tell us both, right? Because this is a new owner, so we want to understand. You can say, first floor, same as it's used today, we're just rebuilding it or reconfiguring it. Second floor, never approved for offices, we're requesting to be allowed to have half office and retain
That's
the
fine,
apartment.
which you have, in fact, part of the record.
Okay,
of
you have a
the
sketch plan in front of us now, so I'm fine if you want to reuse some of that for an application, right? I have this on the agenda as a sketch plan.
That's correct.
Okay, so you're asking us, what should you apply for? We're
That's
giving
fine.
you that
Okay.
feedback.
Understood.
And I just learned something, the fact that you're changing the parking almost immediately mandates, takes you out of the realm of minor site plan, so it's going to require a public hearing.
It depends on
Yeah,
what you're doing.
I'm not going to argue with you there, Mike. I'm only moving it over 2 feet, but that's
Right.
okay. We'll come back for an amended site plan, and we'll give you whatever you need. That's all I need is direction.
But you're adding spaces, because you're going from 18 or 19 spaces to 23 spaces, right?
I'm
So-
basically representing what is there. I don't even know, because I never saw the original,
Yeah,
original
that's-
site
that's the
plan.
problem, he's adding a bunch
So
of
I don't know
stuff.
what was
Or they were already
originally-
added, I guess. So
If it is just a driveway.
It's not.
So you're not having to repave it, all those spaces are existing now?
Well, this looks pretty darn close to what I have on my plan, Michelle.
But that's what I'm saying, if you're not going outside the paved area or the disturbed areas, and it's just planters and lighting,
That's pretty darn close
Yeah.
of exactly what's there.
Then you can treat it as a fun fact to know and tell. If you change the parking substantially, you're going to public hearing. But if you don't,
Again, once we have an application, we would make a determination like that, but Mike is just giving you a sense of what would likely happen.
because we're sharing.
Do you have any other questions for us?
No, you guys have any questions for me?
Okay.
Haven't you been before us with other doctors whose offices have gone awry? I think you have.
Perhaps you didn't mean to ask us to ask you more questions.
Good job.
Is this your niche? Is this what you?
Thank
Good night.
I can rattle a
you.
couple
Thank
more
you,
off
Al.
for you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a discussion for iTooth amended site plan on Route 82. Thank you for lending your board, Mike.
Oh, yeah. do it.
Good evening. iTooth. I'm assuming that the board is somewhat familiar with the location. I also understand this has been before the board a couple of times.
Yes.
Okay. So the original intent, in terms of coming in before the planning board, was to add some solar arrays in the back. Seems pretty straightforward. As this has evolved, as I understand, that some parking spaces showed up on the new plan, on the new survey, of which were not shown on a site plan that was actually approved by the planning board in 1995, okay? The parking spaces, as per the old site plan, are a total of 28 required. I didn't see anything on there in terms of how that number has come up with, and that's kind of important because what's required now is different than what was required then. And I assume it was probably a zoning change and some parking calculation changes presumptively. So the site requires a total of 40 parking spaces based upon our calcs, and there's a total of 30. With the parking that sits in the back, the site shows a total of 44. So I guess one of the reasons that the parking was installed, and it shouldn't have been without proper site plan approvals, because there was a need for parking on the site. 28 just seems like it just probably wasn't doing the job, and they needed additional spots. So as I understand that the parking in the back is primarily used for staff,
Employees.
doctors themselves. There's not a whole lot of delineation out in the field as to assuring that those spots are used for that. There's a very narrow one-way access drive on the north side of the building which allows for cars to get to that back portion. So what we've done, and I'm kind of sticking with the parking here for a little bit because I know it's kind of a sticky point. We've shown on our plan some details relative to some signage and some reconfiguring of some spots, so forth in the front, to try and maintain that parking in the back because just, again, myself and driving by the site, I know that it gets pretty packed during working hours, so I think there is an advantage of having some of the parking in the back and making sure that that is used strictly for employees and the doctors themselves. But also letting people know we have a one-way drive here, letting them know that employees are only permitted in the back, and that regular clientele would not be. Yes.
Mike, of the 40 requirement, how much of that is employee parking? Do you know?
Well, when we do our calculation, I don't believe it breaks out for employees. It's just a number.
I thought it was like a certain percentage based on, the number of offices and the number of projected employees per office. So in other words, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, how close are you to the target?
So I have on here, based upon the code as I understand it, for medical dental. Okay, there's a provision for medical dental within it. It's one space per 150 square foot of gross floor area. So the building is 6,000 square foot. Take 6,000 divided by 150 gives you your 40.
Okay.
So it's a straightforward application for medical dental.
But I know that in the medical stuff, that the proportion of employee parking is much higher. So I guess the point I'm making is you're probably pretty close to the actual need of 30 people, 30 spaces for the patients, and that the 14 in the back is probably pretty close. It's just this little issue of they're highly secluded by that little glitch, right?
Access
But the
way.
parking basically balances.
I believe so, and that's probably
Okay.
the reason why he did it in the first place.
So was the parking in the back ever approved at all, or was it just installed without an updated site plan?
The only information I have relative to the site plan is the one from 1995, and I don't see anything from that time to current relative to any modification detailing that additional paving.
I looked at aerials, it looks like it was put in sometime between 2004 and 2009, at least the paving was done between that time.
Okay, but there was nothing brought to the planning board earlier, okay. But it's been out there a long time. Is it currently functioning as employee parking, or do you have,
Yeah, I don't believe, there is, I think, one sign out there kind of saying employee only, but it's not enough, and it's not warning them of the one-way access. It's not enough to be two-way. So you have to pull out, take a look, make sure that people aren't, kind of running into each other.
It's not inviting.
Mike, do you know if the boat's been removed?
I believe that has.
I think the only thing outstanding for the building department is that there's a car charging station there, and they submitted a permit to keep the car charging station there, but the electric hasn't been approved yet. That's pending.
Does the town issue permits for car charging stations?
The electric,
well, we have to have right.
Ah, okay.
But
But you're proposing
theoretically,
to
if it's
keep
on the
that.
site plan, it would have to be shown on the site plan, but right now, they allow it just with an electrical permit.
Are you showing it on the current?
What would you like, I can show that.
Show it on the plan,
Show it on the
yeah.
plan.
Now, is that on the employee side or the public side?
that's on the employee side.
Or the owner has an electric car, probably.
And so, Mike, you're proposing additional signage to clearly restrict the access to the back?
For employees only.
And-
On both sides.
Okay. On both sides, tell me what you mean by that.
Well, you have the access way here.
Coming in and going out.
So coming this way, just one lane only, and
So
then
you-
this way is more employee, one lane only, going in this direction. Now, presumption is that whoever comes this way won't forget that coming back this way, this was a one-way lane, but it kind of gives notice to kind of take a look.
Okay,
You know? That was the idea.
okay.
Good.
I haven't tried to get back there. Is it dark? Is it easily visible if there's a car coming at you when you're trying to traverse where it's one lane only?
It's flat, and it's a pretty straight shot, so I don't
Very
think there's...
narrow.
Yeah, I don't think it's...
It's,
there's-
the
But it's not like we're likely to have two cars kind of,
No, you'll see a car.
you're going to see
You
whether
can't-
somebody's coming in,
You
right?
can't move very quickly because the trees are very close to the car, so you're sort of having to navigate a very narrow passageway.
Okay.
Sounds
The
like
only
it's been there for
issue-
about 15 years. Has there ever been a problem?
I'm not intimately familiar with
Okay.
what goes on over there, but I haven't
Right.
heard of any.
There's no,
But at minimum,
charred
before someone can enter, but before someone from the main parking lot could enter that parking lot, they're going to see signs that say employee only, one lane, and hopefully will stop.
And you're gonna go at you're moving at a very slow speed going through there, because you have to be, it's so narrow.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there,
All right.
the chance of a
Michelle, are
collision
you-
is pretty...
Are you comfortable with the break between 44, at least 28 of the spots in the front that would essentially be for patients and 14 in the back for employees, with 40 required? It seems like that's probably reasonable.
I mean, it's been working for a long time now, so
Okay.
I think the only issue was you were gonna show some sort of striping, right, so people don't park where you have that entrance to the back parking, or show something, some sort of striping, I think,
Up in the front here.
yeah.
Yeah, it gets just a little tight, so we were just gonna do some reconfiguration of some of the striping just so people can kind of make that turn getting in and out of there. You know, we're not losing any parking spaces. It's just kind of a cross-hatched area. If there's nothing else on the parking, we could talk about the arrays a little bit. We are proposing 3 arrays on the back side. We've shown on this plan the existing septic area. It includes both the primary area as well as the expansion area. We do have one portion of the arrays that actually do nip the edge of the septic area. One of the things that I understand has been kind of explained to you in the past.
Can you just tap those, because I think it was one by you guys. Just unplug one if it seems like there's, if you find one that's sparking.
That's weird. Okay, try again.
All right. We're on. So we have a small portion of the arrays that actually do touch the edge of the septic. Now, these arrays are not plugged into the ground. What they're doing is they actually have basically it's a concrete structure that sits on the ground, okay, that the array sticks out of, so there'll be no penetrations into the ground and thus no penetrations into the septic area.
The arrays on them.
Okay?
Okay. Does any part of the concrete overlap the septic area, or is it just that the array itself will overlap?
Oh,
It does.
You can see,
like that strip in
So,
between.
are you
That's the
pretty
array.
confident that if there was a septic problem, you would have to disconnect the arrays and move them temporarily while you dug up, but that you would be able to dig up the septic?
I guess that would be the case. Being that these are on these concrete platforms, they have the ability to be moved and shifted and so forth.
But there's a center pole, right, and they branch out. So if it's just the overhang that's over, or even, like my brother can swivel his. And, what? So is it a
So are
septic
these
issue or not?
swiveling arrays, or are these
I don't believe so.
stationary arrays?
No, I think you could take the system apart.
We just need you to come to the mic, if that's all right.
You could take the system apart and then move the blocks. They're 7,000 pounds per block. About 178 pounds per square foot is what the calculation shows. It wouldn't be an easy task, but you can move it.
So if there's a septic problem,
The other item is, this is, we're kind of next to this open primary system. I mean, if there was an issue,
It's right on the edge.
septic would probably be pushing.
Way too much back there. I think it's all good bank around there.
But, I want to think about the weight of that. It's not really too extreme based upon square footage. So, and I do know the area out there, no guarantees, but I do know that that's very good workable material out there. I think it's been out there for 20 years. My time of being out there, I've never seen any kind of a failure situation. So, knowing that it's pretty much run a bank gravel, I don't suspect that we're in a situation where, again, that would happen. Listen, anything can happen in any period of time.
Right.
But there's the ability, which is one of the luxuries of having this, the ability of being able to move it if we have to, or shift it for repair.
Okay. Michelle, if these are sitting on concrete pads that are movable concrete pads, are they even considered structures?
Well, I mean, I think by our definition, they are, because
Our
they're on the
definition of
ground.
movable is 7,000 pounds.
It's anything
That's fair,
that
that's
stays
fair.
on the ground, I believe, is how we defined it, so I think they are technically structures.
Okay.
Temporary maybe, but not really temporary.
The town hasn't done any specific guidelines in our zoning with regard to what these need to look like or anything. So this is, I'm assuming, Mike, these are sized in accordance with, I think the typical New York State law says you can go up to 10% over your average need from the prior year or something like that. Is that correct, or are you doing something more than that?
It's under 100%, actually,
Okay,
because of the size of the arrays and the amount of space that we're allowed to use.
okay.
He's not going to achieve.
So you're not trying to generate power to sell to another electric company where you would be making money at the site from this solar array?
The NYSERDA wouldn't approve the project if he was exceeding more than 110% of his
Right.
usage.
Okay. I'm asking that just to confirm for our record that you're not doing something here to try to generate power as a business purpose. You're just offsetting your own usage.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other changes to the plan, Mike, that we haven't talked about? So I've got the additional striping and signage to restrict access to the rear. You've now placed the rear parking on the site. You've got all the parking spots delineated. And you're showing you will show the charging station. It's not there yet. And you are showing the solar arrays as they are expected to be positioned.
Correct.
Okay. Scott or Michelle, I know that the septic is the purview of the Board of Health, but are we worried about having the solar arrays encroach? It's a small encroachment, but having them encroach on the SDS? Okay. Or septic, I should say, yeah, okay. All right. Michelle, there's basically 3 changes here. Is there a reason that this needs to go to public hearing? Or are we able, since this is a site that has had this layout for some time now, are we able to do this as a minor modification? Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for the applicant?
Is there any visibility issue from adjoining properties?
There isn't. It's pretty well hidden in the back there.
Yeah, the residence is here, next door, because it is residential.
Yeah.
And there's these pine trees, to be honest with you, they could probably use a trim.
It feels like a wall when you're
Yeah.
driving through them.
Makes you wonder how Dr. Signa got his boat back there.
Okay. If there's no, sorry, was there another comment? Okay. If there's no other questions or comments, do I have a motion to approve as a minor modification to the I-2 site plan, the solar arrays showing the charging station with Mike, which Mike, you'll have to put on the plan and provide a final copy back to the planning board, and the striping and signage to restrict access for employees to the rear parking area?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the Barnum-Spock lot line realignment on West Hook Road.
Hi, I'm Kevin Keegan. How are you guys?
Good.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What would you like to know?
Do we have a copy of the
I'll bring
plan
that.
we can put up?
Yep.
Just
You
bear with
bring
us
it.
for a moment.
Would you like me to just do this real quick since I?
Sure, that'd be
okay.
great. Thanks.
So, he's got a pre-existing.
Michelle, we just need you at a microphone, so.
All right, hold on.
This is one, as I interpret it, it doesn't really completely fix any of the variances, but improves all of them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And is this, what's driving this? Is this a desire to
Okay.
expand the garage, or?
Just, I want to have a buffer zone for, they're planning on possibly selling or something in a few years. So I'd prefer to have that property be my own, because it's like right next to my garage and right next to my playground for the kids. So it'll just give me some more privacy and potentially not have the neighbor walking through the woods. Just more of a buffer, really.
So there's no immediate plans like expand the garage or
No,
anything?
not
Okay.
immediately, maybe in 10, 15 years possibly, but not right now.
Okay.
Just to maintain more privacy, really.
Okay. And about how much land are you,
It's just, I have like 9.1 or 8.9, and we're getting 8.4 from the neighbors.
okay,
So it's almost, I'm in an R2 zone, so I almost conform, So I end up with 1.77 instead of 2.
not
And they're at R1, so they're still at 1.24 or something.
Okay.
And there's a weird little clause in the pre-existing non-conforming lot section that says if you're in an R2 zone and you have a pre-existing lot, you can, all you have to do is follow the bulk standards of the R1 zone. So
Okay.
essentially he's doing that.
Okay. And the square footage is more than what we could do as a, it didn't open, yeah, the square footage is more than what we could do as a minor modification, so it would require a public hearing, is that correct? I think that's correct.
Sorry, it is, it's because it's 20,000 square feet, so that's half an acre approximately.
Okay,
And I'm sorry, I can't, I don't know why this
It went
is
open.
all right. I think we're familiar with it, Michelle, that's okay, it's discussion, it's not a public hearing.
It's essentially the back portion of a 1 acre lot, and he's just adding it to his lot. And actually, it will also, your home is old enough to have an outhouse.
Yeah,
So
it's
it will, there's an
1830s.
existing outhouse that sits on the property line, and this will, by adding this, it will make that conforming, because it'll meet setbacks.
Okay? Okay, great. And it's not, you said the adjoining lot will still have at least 1.2, and they're in the R1. So it's not making them non-conforming to do this?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so we can set this for public hearing. You would have to send out notifications fairly soon, because I think they need to go out about 25 days before a public hearing.
Okay.
But we could set you for public hearing on September 18th or October 16th.
September is fine.
September's fine, okay. It just means you need to get your notices out fairly quickly. Is there anything else, Michelle, that I think we've got the plans, there's nothing else that's missing. I have no
How long do the notices have to be
notes.
out for?
I'm sorry, I
How
didn't
long
hear
do the
you.
notices have to be out for?
I believe it's 25 days? 20 days, sorry, 20 days.
All right,
So our meeting in September is on September 18th,
okay.
so essentially we have
Gives
to
you
have
about a
them,
week and a half.
yeah, to get them
Of
out.
course.
And it's neighbors who live within,
Neighbors that abut me,
No.
property-wise, or
500 feet.
500 feet?
Yeah, just come in the
Certified
planning
returns.
office and we can help you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so do I have a motion to schedule Barnum Spock lot line realignment on West Hook Road for public hearing on September 18th?
so moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So you'll send your notices out, and we'll have you for public hearing on September 18th.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And then after that, then what do I see?
Then you will likely complete your transaction and file deeds to realign the lots.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Lori, one thing before we close, that's the last item, right? I think at the very beginning, we did the pledge and then jumped right to our agenda items. Did we talk about announcing the next two meetings officially? and cover
I
the meeting?
apologize, I did not. You're right.
So maybe we can
So-
circle back and do that at the end.
So just so that anyone who wants to know, we have two upcoming meetings, one on September 18th and one on October 16th. And as of right now, we do have several public hearings on for September 18th, so we also will have, and we don't have it at this time because we don't know what the venue will be, but we will need to find another location to be able to hold the Copart meeting. So whether that's on our September 18th meeting, and we just move that meeting to another location, or whether we have it as a separate meeting in another location, we'll work with Pam to coordinate that and certainly put it out into the public.
And that will follow the format that we were going to use tonight, where it's not really a public forum or public hearing.
It'll be a public meeting, but not a public hearing, so we won't be entertaining comment from the public, but we will, the public can attend any of our meetings. We encourage the public to attend any of our meetings if they have an interest in something on our agenda, so.
Okay.
Since it was just an unexpected,
Right. And by the way, in
volume
your
of
defense
people.
about forgetting the first of the item, it was not the way we normally kick off meetings, so.
that's true, and hopefully that's not the way we will have to kick off any other meetings,
No,
but
I just
I
want to
agree
make
with
sure we
that.
got on the record the announcement.
I appreciate it. No, that's great. Thank you, Steve.
Lori, do you want to do the minutes?
I was going to hold them, I apologize, Pam, if it's all right, I'd like to hold them to September. I haven't had a chance to.
I know I wasn't here on May 15th, and I wasn't sitting up here on June, so.
Okay. Okay, so we'll hold over our approval of minutes to our September meeting. Does anybody have anything else for the meeting tonight? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.